In a quiet attic in Northern California, a woman found something she was never meant to see. A letter sealed untouched, yellowed by 80 years of dust. The handwriting was elegant, trembling, and addressed to her grandmother. The date, August 14th. As she unfolded it, she expected a tender note from a soldier lost in war. But as her eyes reached the final line, her breath caught. What was written there, hidden for generations, would change everything she believed about love, loyalty, and the war itself. World War II, love letter from California. She panics after discovering the truth hidden for 80. Claire Henderson never knew her grandmother well. Margaret Anderson had passed away 3 months earlier at 98, taking most of her stories with her. She'd lived alone in this house for over 70 years. Her life, a mystery wrapped in quiet routines and unspoken memories. Claire had come to sort through her belongings, a task she'd been dreading. Old houses hold secrets, and this one, perched on the cliffs above Bodega Bay, seemed to whisper them. It was in the attic, beneath a stack of nursing uniforms from the 1940s, that she found the box. Claire softly, to herself, "What were you hiding, Grandma? What were you hiding, Grandma?" The envelope was thick, expensive paper, the kind reserved for important correspondence. The seal was still intact, wax pressed with the insignia of the U.S. Army Air Corps. Claire lifts it carefully. The address is written in elegant fountain pen. Miss Margaret Anderson, Bodega Bay, California. Return address: Lytton Thomas Reed, Pacific Theater Command. Claire, whisper. Thomas Reed? I've never heard that name. Her grandmother had never married, never spoken of anyone from the war. The official story was simple. She'd been a naval nurse in San Francisco, dedicated her life to service, and retired quietly to this house. But here, in her hands, was evidence of something else. Someone else. Claire, inner voice. V.O. Who were you, Thomas Reed? And why did she keep this hidden for 80 years? For a long moment, Claire considered leaving it sealed. Some secrets, she thought, were meant to stay buried. But then she looked at her grandmother's photograph again, at the way Margaret's eyes held something Claire had never seen in her joy. Claire whispered, "It's time someone read this." But what she found inside wasn't a love letter. At least, not just a love letter. It was a confession, a warning, and a truth that had been buried for nearly a century. To understand the letter, you have to understand them. Margaret and Thomas. 1943. The height of World War II. Margaret Anderson was 24 years old when she became a naval nurse. She was sharp, compassionate, and unshakably composed, even when the hospital overflowed with boys who'd barely survived the Pacific. She didn't have time for distractions, didn't have room in her heart for anything but duty, until she met him. September 12, 1943. A charity dance for servicemen shipping out to the Pacific. Margaret had been dragged there by friends. She stood near the punch bowl, already planning her escape. Lieutenant Thomas Reed was a bomber pilot, just promoted, about to lead his first squadron into combat. He was confident in the air. But on the ground, he was just a kid from Sacramento who'd never been good at talking to girls. Thomas, awkward smile. I was told by a very reliable source that you're the best dancer here. Margaret raises an eyebrow, amused. Is that so? And who's your source? Thomas grins. Nay, just now. I made it up. Margaret laughs, genuine, surprised. She hadn't expected that. Margaret, that's terrible. Thomas, I know. But did it work? She considers him for a moment, then extends her hand. Margaret, one dance. Don't step on my feet. Falling in love. What started as one dance became two. Then dinner. Then long walks along the bay. For 3 months, they existed in a bubble, stolen moments between his training flights and her hospital shifts. Scenes: Thomas and Margaret sitting on a pier, feet dangling over the water, sharing a sandwich, him teaching her to skip stones. She's terrible at it. They laugh, her sneaking out of the hospital late at night to meet him under the Golden Gate Bridge. Him holding her close, both of them pretending they have more time than they do. He told her about growing up in Sacramento, about wanting to see the world, about how flying made him feel invincible. She told him about losing her father young, about why nursing mattered, about the dreams she'd put on hold. They didn't talk about the war. Not at first. Because talking about it meant acknowledging that he'd have to leave. The letters begin, December 1943. A train station, soldiers boarding. Families saying goodbye. Margaret and Thomas stand together, apart from the crowd. December 10th. His orders came through. Pacific Theater, departure in 48 hours. Thomas holds both of Margaret's hands. His voice is steady, but his eyes betray him. Thomas, I'll write you every week, I promise. Margaret, trying to smile. You better. I'm going to hold you to that. Thomas, when I get back. Margaret cuts him off gently. Don't make promises about after. Just come back. He pulls her into a long embrace. The camera holds on them as other couples say goodbye around them. He kissed her once, long and desperate, like he was memorizing her. And then he was gone. Correspondence, montage, letters exchanged across the Pacific. Voiceovers alternate between Thomas and Margaret, reading their words. For the next 8 months, they lived through ink and paper. Visual. Margaret writing by lamplight in her small apartment. Margaret's, Dear Thomas, the hospital is busier than ever. We received 50 new patients yesterday. Boys, really? Some of them barely 18. I think of you every time one comes through those doors. I pray you're safe. I pray you're careful. Write to me about something beautiful. Tell me what the ocean looks like from where you are. Help me remember there's still a world beyond all this. Yours, Margaret. Transition. Thomas in a makeshift barracks tent, writing by flashlight. Thomas's, Dear Margaret, you asked about the ocean. It's different here. Darker, wilder. Sometimes at dawn, if the sky is clear, it turns this impossible shade of gold. I think about you then. About walking along the bay. About how you made even silence feel full. I keep your photograph in my flight jacket. The guys tease me, but I don't care. You're my good luck charm, counting the days until I can see you again. All my love, Thomas. More letters. Seasons change. Months pass. His letters were full of hope at first. Jokes, stories, plans for when the war ended. But slowly, something began to change. The ship. Summer 1944. Thomas's letters become shorter, more guarded. Thomas's, Dear Margaret, I can't say much about where we are or what we're doing. Just know that I'm safe. I think about you constantly. That's what keeps me going. I'll write again soon. Love, Thomas. Margaret reading the letter at her kitchen table. Her face shows concern. Narrator. Margaret felt it immediately, the distance growing in his words. Not emotional distance. Something else. Fear. Narrator. By August 1944, Thomas Reed had seen things that didn't make sense. Supply shipments that never arrived. Maps that contradicted intelligence reports. Orders that put his squadron in unnecessary danger. And then he discovered something that would cost him everything. The final letter, August 14th, 1944. Thomas sits alone in his quarters. A single candle burns. He writes slowly, deliberately. On the night of August 14th, 1944, Lloyd Thomas Reed wrote one final letter. He sealed it, marked it urgent, and gave it to a courier he trusted. It never reached her. 3 days later, Thomas Reed's plane went down over the Pacific. The official report listed it as enemy fire, but Thomas knew better, and he'd written it all in that letter. Claire reads the truth. Silence. Only the sound of Claire's breathing and distant ocean waves. What Claire read in that attic changed everything she thought she knew. Not just about her grandmother, about the war itself. Close up. The letter. Claire's voice reads aloud, shaking. Claire, reading, voice trembling. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. But there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you weeks ago, but I was afraid they'd intercept my letters, afraid of putting you in danger. Claire pauses, takes a breath, continues. Clear reading, I've discovered something terrible. Men in my own command, officers I trusted, have been falsifying reports. Shipments marked for the front lines are being rerouted and sold. Intelligence maps are being altered, sending squadrons into ambushes. Claire's hands shake. She grips the letter tighter. Claire, reading. I reported it 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've been reassigned to missions no one expects me to survive. My mail has been monitored. My movements watched. I know what's coming, Margaret. They can't let me leave this theater alive. Claire stops, covers her mouth. Tears stream down her face. Thomas Reed hadn't died in combat. He'd been silenced. The full confession. Claire continues reading through tears. Claire reading. I've hidden evidence, copies of the falsified reports, names, dates. I've sent them to a contact stateside. If something happens to me, maybe someone will listen. But Margaret, my love, I need you to know this wasn't about heroism. It was about doing what was right. Even if it cost me everything. Her voice breaks. She wipes her eyes, forces herself to keep reading. Claire, reading. I don't regret loving you. You were the best part of my life. Every moment with you was stolen from a war that wanted to take everything. If I don't come home, please don't mourn me as a hero. Mourn me as a man who loved you more than duty, more than honor, more than his own life. Long pause. Claire's breathing is shallow. Claire, reading, barely a whisper. I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise. I'm sorry I won't get to marry you, grow old with you, give you the life you deserve. But know this, my last thought won't be fear. It'll be you, always you, yours beyond the end. Thomas. Silence. Claire lowers the letter, stares at nothing. The weight of 80 years of hidden truth, crushing down. The realization. Claire stands abruptly, paces, her mind racing. Claire to herself, frantic. She never knew. She spent her whole life thinking he just died in some random mission. She never knew he was murdered. She looks at the photographs again. Margaret's face, always composed, always distant. Margaret Anderson had waited for months after Thomas's death was reported. She'd written letters to his commanding officers, filed inquiries, begged for information, but she never received answers, only silence. Flashback, 1945. Margaret, older now, sitting alone in her apartment. The war is over. Victory parades fill the streets. But she stares out the window, hollow. She never married, never loved again. She'd spent 70 years carrying a grief she couldn't name, mourning a man she thought had simply been unlucky. Back to present. Claire collapses into a chair, letter clutched to her chest. Claire. Whisper. He died protecting her. And she never even knew. The evidence. Claire frantically digs through the box, finds a small leather journal. Thomas's service record, notes, names, date. Tucked beneath the letter were documents. Thomas had hidden photocopies of falsified supply requisitions, names of officers involved, coordinates of rerouted shipments. Claire spreads them across the attic floor. Her hands shake as she pieces it together. Claire, realizing this is proof. After all these years, this is proof. She pulls out her phone. searches, finds articles about wartime corruption investigations, declassified documents, cases that were never solved. Listen, Thomas Reed had been right, and he paid for it with his life. The emotional collapse. Claire sits in the fading afternoon light, surrounded by the fragments of a love story that never got its ending. She reads the final line of the letter again, Claire voice breaking. Yours beyond the end. She closes her eyes. Tears fall freely now. For 80 years, this letter had waited in silence. For 80 years, the truth had been buried with the man who tried to expose it. And for 80 years, Margaret Anderson had lived believing she'd simply been unlucky in love. Claire looks at her grandmother's photograph one more time. Claire whisper, "You weren't unlucky, Grandma. You were lied to." Fade to black. Heartbeat sound returns. Seeking the truth? 1 week later, Claire sits across from a military historian in a small archive office. Claire spent the next week verifying everything she could. She contacted military historians, submitted FOIA requests, reached out to veterans advocacy groups. The historian examines the documents, his expression grave. Historian. This is significant. These names match officers who were under investigation in the 1950s. The cases were closed due to lack of evidence. Claire. But now we have evidence. Historian nods slowly. Now we have evidence. He looks at the letter. Historian. Your grandmother, did she ever know? Claire shakes her head. No, she died thinking he was just another casualty. Historian. Softly. Then maybe this is for her. Margaret's grave. A quiet cemetery overlooking Bodega Bay. Waves crash below. Seagulls circle overhead. Margaret Anderson was buried on a hill overlooking the ocean. She'd requested it specifically. Said she wanted to watch the horizon. Always waiting. Always hoping. Claire kneels beside the simple headstone. Margaret Anderson, 1919-2017. Beloved nurse, forever remembered. She places the letter beneath a bouquet of white roses. Claire, softly, he loved you, Grandma. More than anything, and he died trying to do the right thing. She pauses, wipes her eyes. Claire, I'm going to make sure people know. I'm going to tell your story. Both of your stories. Wind rustles through the grass. The sun breaks through the clouds, casting golden light across the cemetery. Narrator VO. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive in time to change anything, but it arrives anyway. Because love, real love, doesn't disappear just because it's forgotten. It waits. The legacy. Montage. Claire. Working. Meeting with journalists. Submitting articles. Thomas's story slowly coming to light. Within 6 months, Thomas Reed's case was reopened. The evidence he'd hidden, combined with recently declassified documents, confirmed everything he'd written. A formal investigation was launched. Names were named. The truth, 80 years late, finally surfaced. News headlines flash. WW2 corruption case reopened. Hero pilot vindicated decades later. Love letter exposes military cover-up. Thomas Reed was posthumously awarded commendations for his integrity and bravery. Margaret Anderson's name was added to his memorial plaque. Together at last, in history, if not in life. The final reflection. Claire stands on the pier where Thomas and Margaret had their first kiss. Sunset paints the sky in golds and purples. Claire keeps the letter now, carefully preserved, protected. She reads it sometimes when the world feels too heavy, when she needs to remember that love, even when broken, can still mean something. Close up. The letter in its protective sleeve, the ink faded but still legible. In war, so many things are lost. Letters, names, promises. But love. Love finds its way, even through 80 years of silence. Margaret Anderson spent 70 years believing she'd lost him to chance. She never knew he'd lost himself to choice. The choice to do what was right, no matter the cost. But maybe, in the end, it doesn't matter. Because the love they shared, the moments stolen between duty and war, those were real. And truth, no matter how late it arrives, still sets the story free. Maybe the truth doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it finally lets us rest. Fade to black. Silence. For all the words that never reached home. And for those who kept writing anyway.